everyone, my name is George Farmer and this video is about creating a new aquascape in this lovely little nano aquarium. I'm going to be using Dennerle plants throughout the whole process, so I've got a lovely selection here. I might not use all of them, but I'll certainly use some of them. I've got some tissue culture plants, so they're called, Dennerle call it in vitro. So we've got some Eleocharis pusilla, which is like a dwarf hairgrass. We've got some Micranthemum Montecarlo there, which is a really popular carpeting plant, really easy. A bit of colour, we've got some mini Alternanthera, reineckii, and a couple of species I'm really excited about. These are really rare, demand is exceeding the supply at the moment, so I'm really lucky to get hold of these. But I've got some Anubias nano Pangolino, which is actually the smallest Anubias in the world. It was kind of discovered by accident, so really lucky to have this in the hobby, and I can't wait to aquascape with it. And another really cool plant and relatively new to the hobby as well is the Bucephalandra species, which I'm sure some of you have already heard of, but there's a mini needle leaf variety which is absolutely beautiful, really small leaves, and again I can't wait to aquascape with it. It's a nano tank, so it's really important to use small textured species to help create that sense of scale. So I'll crack on with the aquascape, I'll explain everything as I'm doing it, and hopefully you guys can learn something. So the first step is to put our soil in here. So this is an unbranded soil. A lot of soils perform similar functions, so they help feed the plant roots. They extract nutrients from the water as well and hold it into the soil itself, which obviously helps feed the plants as well. And then it also has a characteristic of buffering the pH and lowering the water hardness as well, so it has lots of good characteristics for a planted tank. I'm using I think it's about 2.5 litres here, so it's only a 14 litre aquarium, so we don't want to put too much in there because it's going to displace quite a lot of water. And a common trick is to actually slope the substrate towards the rear a little to help create a optical illusion of a greater sense of depth. So the next step is to install our hardscape, or the aquarium decoration. I always like to use natural products, so normally wood or rocks. In this case we're just going to be using wood. It's a small tank, so we don't want to be overfilling it with hardscape. I want to use quite a lot of plants. I do like to plant really heavily, especially in new setups, and I've got all these beautiful plants to use, so I'm not going to be using too much hardscape. I've pre-selected a lovely piece of wood here. This has been pre-soaked for a couple of weeks just to make sure it sinks. There's nothing worse than putting your wood in an aquascape, filling it up with water, and then the wood can float up. It's happened to me a few times, and I'm sure it's happened to some of you guys as well, and yeah, it's very frustrating. So we have our wood, and it's really important to look at it from all angles. I'm just looking at it all, rotating it around, just thinking about what's the best, how is that going to look best in the aquascape. So I like to have a certain flow in an aquascape, and I can see that there's 3 main branches there, and they're all flowing from left to right, and I think that would look great. Just place that roughly centrally in the aquarium, and we can bury the wood in the soil, no problem. And that actually helps it look more natural, as if the wood is coming out of the earth, and that's what we're trying to do. We're trying to create this essence of nature and transfer that into our aquascape. Okay, we've got the soil in, we've got the wood in. Next step is to just put enough water in there to cover the soil, and that makes the planting process much easier. So I'll just move the lamp backwards like so, and then that gives me some space to put my special red colander, and that just helps disperse the water to ensure we don't get too much turbulence. It doesn't stir up the soil too much, which can cloud the water. And then just pour the water in really slowly into the colander. So now we're ready to start planting. So I always like to start off with the foreground and then progress to the background, and then finally, if there's any epiphyte plants, I'll attach them to the wood last of all. So for the foreground, I'm going to use a mixture of species, but the first one I'm going to use is Micranthemum species Montecarlo. This is a really popular species at the moment. It's quite new, and it's really easy. So Helianthus cuba was probably one of the most popular carpeting plants. but it's actually quite tricky. A lot of people do fail with Helianthus cuba, but Micranthemum is very similar. It's a slightly larger leaf form, but it is much easier, and it's a beautiful plant, quite fast growing and not very demanding. So this is the Dennerle in vitro version of Montecarlo, and to prepare it we simply remove the lid. It's really simple. Take the plant out of the pot, and you can see the nutrient-rich jelly, agar jelly, that we need to remove that. We don't want that in the aquarium. So we literally just soak it in water and just massage the roots, and you'll find the jelly comes off really easily, no problem at all. What I like to do, you can use scissors or you can use your fingers. I like to use my fingers. We just separate it into different portions, like so, and you can make the portions as small as you like. The smaller you make them, the more coverage you get. So if you're on a strict budget, you can even use one or two pots to get quite a lot of coverage, and you can literally plant individual stems like that if you'd like to. I'm not going to do that today because it will take too long, so I'll divide it up into quite large portions, and we just repeat that process. So I've got two pots here. I'm just going to plant that all the way along the foreground. So repeat the process with the second pot. Remove the plant. Massage the jelly off, and then just repeat. Simple as that. So I've prepared the Montecarlo. I've split it up into lots of individual portions, and I'll plant them using my pincette here. So we've planted the Montecarlo. Next I'm going to plant some Eleocharis pusilla, which is a dwarf hairgrass species, again in vitro version. So just repeat the process. Take off the lid, remove the plant, and massage off the jelly. And then we split the plant up into individual portions, just like the Montecarlo, like so. You can split it up into as many portions as you can for best coverage. And we plant that into the soil. So I've prepared the Dennerle in vitro Eleocharis pusilla, split it up into several portions, and I'm going to plant that in between the Montecarlo, and that's going to create a really lovely, interesting texture. So we've planted our foreground, we've used some Montecarlo and some Eleocharis pusilla. Next I'm going to plant some Cryptocoryne wendtii compact. So I've never tried this plant before. It's classed as a foreground plant, so what I'm going to do is I'm going to plant it around the shaded area underneath the wood. So the light's obviously coming down from above, and where the wood kind of overhangs the substrate, it's going to be quite shaded. So we need some low light tolerant plants, and that's where the Cryptocoryne will hopefully come in really handy, because it is low light tolerant. So I'm just going to plant that round the base of the wood, and we prepare it exactly the same way as we did the other plants. So I've prepared the Cryptocoryne wendtii compact, and I've separated it into 6 portions, and I'm going to plant that around the wood. So next I'm going to plant some Alternanthera reineckii mini. Again, it's the in vitro version, so we prepare it exactly the same way as before. Alternanthera reineckii mini, it's a beautiful plant. It gives a real nice colour, which we need for impact, and it remains fairly short, hopefully. I do want it to have a little bit of height. I'm going to put it around the central area, so hopefully we'll see it eventually coming up above the wood. And yeah, it's like a focal point plant, so we need to be really careful where we position this kind of species. So next I'm going to plant some Helianthum tenellum broadleaf. I'm going to use this as a transitional plant. So From the hairgrass and the Montecarlo, I'm going to use this going into the background, and then behind this I'll use a stem plant which I'll talk about in a moment. So prepare this exactly the same way as the other in vitro plants. So just like before, I've separated the Helianthum into several portions. I'm going to plant that just behind the hairgrass and the Montecarlo. So the final background plant is going to be Pogostemon erectus, an absolutely beautiful stem plant, one of my favourites, has a really ornamental feel to it. So to prepare it, simply remove your plant label there. These are great, by the way. They give you all the information you need. There's a QR code there, like a 3D barcode, so you can scan that with your smartphone and get all the information about the plant. It tells you the lighting demands, it tells you the temperature, and it also really handily tells you whereabouts in the aquascape it should go. So we know this is a background plant just from that picture there. Remove the rock wool from the pot, separate the rock wool from the stems. You can do this underwater, which actually makes it a little bit easier. And then just simply separate the stems. So final plants I'm going to be using are, I'm really excited about these. I've got this smallest Anubias in the world, Anubias nana Pangolino, which is introduced to Dennerle quite accidentally. It's quite a long story which I'm sure I'll tell you about another time. But as you can see, absolutely stunning. I love really small textured plants, especially in nano aquascaping. It gives that really good sense of scale, and I'm really super excited to be able to use this. I'm going to attach this to the wood. I'm going to try to insert it into the nooks and crannies, and I'm also going to use super glue to attach it. So it's going to be quite tricky in a small space to use thread or cotton or fishing line. So super glue comes in really handy, and I'll show you how I'll do that in a moment. And then another plant I'm going to be using, which is another new species, is the Bucephalandra species mini needle leaf. Absolutely beautiful, really fine textures again. It's an elongated leaf, but the curled ruffled look on the leaves is absolutely stunning. And again, I'm going to attach that to the wood using super glue, or hopefully inserting it into the little cracks in the wood. So yeah, really excited. The great thing about these kind of plants, and we call them epiphyte plants, is that they thrive being attached to the wood, and it really brings the aquascape to life. It makes the aquascape look mature. And it just adds really lovely interest. This is a nature aquarium style aquascape, and it's all about trying to get that essence of nature and transferring it into the aquarium, and epiphyte plants are absolutely perfect for doing that. So I've separated the Anubias nana Pangolino into individual portions, and I'm hoping I can literally just wedge it in the wood, and hopefully it will stay there. After a few weeks, the roots will self-attach to the wood and help secure it. So it just saves using cotton thread or fishing line, which most people use, and I find a little bit annoying, a little bit cumbersome. So yes, I'll literally just hopefully be able to insert it. And that will stay there. And the great thing about Anubias is that it doesn't need much light to thrive. The reason it's so dark green is because it has loads of chlorophyll, which makes it really efficient at using light, so it doesn't actually need much light to thrive. And so we can actually position it in shaded areas, no problem, and that will also help prevent algae build-up on the leaves, which Anubias is quite prone to. Yeah. And you can already see that it's added an immediate impact to the aquascape. It's helped the aquascape look mature, even though it's brand new. So I've separated the Bucephalandra mini needle leaf into two distinct portions, as you can see, and then what I'm going to do is going to glue that. I'll probably glue one portion there, and then the other portion down here, and I'll I'll zoom in on that so you can see exactly how I do that. So just use the super glue, just put a tiny bit on the wood. It does turn a white colour underwater, so you need to hide it as much as you can. So you don't need much, it's very, very strong glue. Totally aquarium safe. And then we just pop that on there like so. Just hold it there for a few seconds. Carefully remove your finger. And hopefully that will stay there. It's quite an open piece of wood here, so I'll just put a dab of super glue just there. And then gently push your plant onto the glue. Wait for a few seconds. And then it's readily attached. While the tank isn't completely submersed, it's really important to stop the plants from drying out, so we use a spray mister occasionally. Especially Anubias, if that dries out it can die off, and Java Fern or Microsorum is another species that's really sensitive to being dried out, so do bear that in mind. So next steps is fill the aquarium with water, and then I'll fit I've got a small external filter with a built-in heater and also a CO2 kit, just to ensure the plants really thrive. So I've filled the aquarium near to the surface. I'm not going to fill it right up just yet because I've got to install the CO2 kit and the filter. You can see there's a couple of floating plants in there, that's no problem. I'll just replant those right now. The Montecarlo in particular, it's got such a fine root structure and the soil is quite loose, so it does tend to float. We just pop that in with the aquascaping tweezers or pincets. I'm just looking for the most empty areas. Okay guys, so the aquascape's now complete. I've moved the tank into a new location, into my hallway in my home, so it's a lovely greeting as you come into the house. I've added a beautiful Siamese fighting fish, so thanks very much to Lisa Bradshaw for supplying that. And the plants, they're not looking brilliant because they've just been planted, but give it a day or so, they'll all upright and growth will start in earnest. So there's quite strong lighting. I'll be using CO2 injection, daily fertilisers, and I expect the aquascape will be looking really, really good in about 2 to 3 weeks. So hopefully I'll be able to give you a video update then. Really, really pleased with the Dennerle plants. Most of them have been the in vitro, the tissue cultured plants, which are great because they're guaranteed to be free from algae, free from pesticides, which is really important if you're keeping shrimp and snails, and also free from disease. You do get a lot for your money. The tissue cultured plants, they're much smaller, but you get more quantity in a pot, so they do represent good value for money. So that wraps it up for today. Finally, if you want to know any more information about Dennerle plants, there is a catalogue available which gives you a description of all the species, and then this will be available from your local Dennerle stockist. So thanks for watching. If you do like what you see, hit that like button, please subscribe and share it with your friends, and take care. Cheerio.